Okay, well, the last 8 or 9 posts we've been talking about producing your recording. And we've got all the tracks down, we've got everything created, we've got everything corrected, and we're at the point where we've got a mix. What is the mix? The mix is the point where you blend everything together, have things stick out the way you want them to stick out, have them fall back the way you want them to fall back. There's all kinds of things to think about. First is the stereo picture. You've got on each channel a pan knob, meaning panorama, and you can literally move things to sound like they're coming out of one side or the other. And so you might want to have your drums set up so hi-hat and snare are relatively central, and then the mounted toms go left to right as you go across, and the floor toms extreme right. One quick thing I recommend, just get the decision out of the way. Put your bass drum and bass guitar right smack in the middle. They will lock together and you don't have to worry about it anymore. If you're not doing that, it's not the end of the world, because bass frequencies have a tendency to disguise where they're coming from, but you're not gaining anything by splitting them apart at all, and you are potentially gaining something by locking them together in the center of the stereo picture. Your lead vocal could be center, a little bit left, a little bit right, but not extreme any direction, or you might lose it if somebody's playing it mono, or playing it, you know, in a big room where maybe it's a restaurant or something. They got a speaker over here and a speaker over here. You want the lead vocal to be heard. Instruments that are played really tightly with the rhythm track can go more extreme. If they're a little loose, they need to come a little bit center, like a couple guitars playing around the same kind of thing. If they're not super tight, you could either put them together, one side or the other, or spread them apart just slightly. But the more extreme you put them, the more they're going to fight each other. They don't have to play exactly the same thing, but they do have to be tight with each other to do that. Things like, let's see, tonalities. Cymbals are going to want to have a lot of sibilants, or high frequency sounds. You might want to put a compressor on lead vocals in certain instruments that have too much dynamics. We've talked about compressors in live sound, and they're invaluable there, but they're even more important in the recording studio. You don't want to overuse them, but you do want to use them enough so that if somebody is singing really soft, and then sing really loud, and then really soft, and really loud again, that you don't have to ride their fader, because if you have to ride that fader, you will never stay on top of it. A compressor allows you to cause that instrument or that vocal to sit in the mix in a much more comfortable way, especially if you don't overuse it, so you leave it a little room to have some dynamics. Use of reverb, and now they've got all kinds of fantastic reverbs compared to what I was using years and years ago. We used a metal plate, or we used a large hall or a stairwell in the back of the studio, whatever we could use to create echo, and there were a couple techniques we used to do that, reverb as it were. And there's a couple different kinds of reverb. There's reverb like you would get in a hall. There's echo like you would get in a tape echo, where you go, hey, 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 it comes back at you. Whereas the reverb or hall reverb is much more organic, and a lot more frequencies coming back, a lot of delays and reflections coming back at the same time. Well, one thing to think about if you want a song to sound extremely intimate, like somebody's whispering in your ear, which is a handy little technique to use these days now that half of us or 90% of us are listening on earbuds, you might want to leave some of the reverb off. The less reverb you use, the more intimate it's going to sound. And the more reverb you use, the more of a hall sound you're in. And these days with an Alesis or something like that, you can say, I want a hall 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, 50 feet tall, and I want the reverb to sound like the room in that kind of a room, or the echo in that kind of a room. So there's all kinds of things you can do to play with reverb. Reverb on things like bass guitar, don't do it. It just muddies things up. What about piano? Use just the right amount and right kind of reverb on piano, you end up sounding like Elton John. Use too much, you end up muddying up the mix, and you really can't discern anything. I mean, it just mushes everything together. All things to think about when you're mixing. Now sit behind the engineer and tell the engineer what you want. They may offer their opinion every once in a while, but you're the producer. You make the decisions. And if it's a couple of you, well, then it's up to you two producers to argue with each other and include the engineer every once in a while. But remember, the engineer is quite possibly there to make the recording go longer, because they make more money then. Anyway, a couple tricks about producing. I am Ryan Michael Galloway, and you're at We Don't Need No Stinking Record Company.com.